Hi, it's Gareth at SIOAOA, and yeah, we're back for season 2. This season, we're still going to be talking about IT service management, the full life cycle of running and managing IT services, and the various aspects and intricacies of doing so. We're also going to be covering some of those emerging topics that have an influence or impact on IT service management, but from a practical point of view. Now, there's not going to be loads of heavyweight slides and presentations, but more so how you, if you're in an IT service management position or role, can hopefully make sense of what these topics mean to you, your businesses, your IT services, and most importantly, your customers and users. Now, a couple of weeks ago when I signed off from Series 1, I said I'd be investing some time to make the production of my videos a little bit more effective. Maybe include the occasional on-screen graphic or visual aid to allow me, when needed, to make my point a little clearer for those of you that prefer the, more visual style. I've done a little bit here and there, but to help set your expectations, don't be expecting on-screen explosions or special effects or car chases. It's still going to be me predominantly talking to camera in this no-frill style. So let's get on with today's video, talking about the importance of effective communications during your major incident process. Okay, season 2, let's get going. So there's not an IT service function in the world that at some point hasn't had to deal with major incidents. Now, back in season 1, I published the How to Major on Major videos, link up in the corner, which centered on service management and operations functions having a consistent definition of what does or does not constitute a major incident. In that video, I touched on one aspect of the process, which is the need for consistent and appropriate communications from those managing the major incident. Be that a specialised major incident manager as part of a dedicated MIM team, or an individual within the organisation assuming that role. Today we're going to look at some practical points on how you can ensure your major incident process is keeping impacted users, stakeholders and IT themselves informed with what is going on at the right time. Now, first up, it's important to call out and reflect on the fact that major incidents have a broad reach and will touch a variety of different stakeholders. Now, I tend to split these into 3 distinct camps: the users of the impacted service, those accountable for the service, and the providers of the service. To talk about that in real terms, let's use an example of an internal IT department within a retail business managing a major incident because the company's online store is unavailable. So in that scenario, who goes into what camp? Well, first off, let's talk about the users of that service. Well, in this scenario, that could be twofold, in fact. It could be internal people and external people to the business. Internal, those employees that rely on the online store to do their job. They may take and prepare orders for shipping, and therefore they'll need to know that because of the incident, they're unlikely to be receiving any orders. In actual fact, they may be the ones that are reporting the fact that the store is down to the IT service desk. And external, those users of the online store, the business's external customers that place orders via the online store. Secondly, those people that are accountable for the service that need to be aware that there is an issue, be that the customer side of the fence or within IT themselves. By customers in this scenario, I mean who do IT provide the online store service to within the retail business. There will most likely be an internal set of individuals who are the business owners for the service, an individual or group who provide the business strategy, requirements, funding for that online store to be operational. I also include in this group those people within IT that need or have to manage those customers. So that might be IT senior management, service or relationship managers, IT people that need to be aware of the issue but maybe not directly hands-on involved. And then thirdly, the providers of the service. Well, again, in this scenario, those people within the IT department, including any partners or suppliers that ensure the online store is operational. Those people that need to be engaged in order to fix the service or deal with any element of responding to the major incident. And that includes the IT service desk or the technical teams that support the service. Now, when a major incident relating to that online store occurs, each of those groups will have a variety of different needs when it comes to communications. And those needs vary, be that based on time, level of detail required, what stage of the process you're at, and so on. However, it's not uncommon for MIM functions to adopt and run a one-size-fits-all at all times approach. If that is the case, whilst yes, major incident management can confidently put a tick in the yes, we've done comms box, feedback from those stakeholder groups is unlikely and, in my experience, is rarely positive. I've been involved over my career in a whole bunch of significant major incidents, and I have the scars to prove it. When I reflect back on those examples that were really well handled to those ones that caused a significant amount of noise from our customer base, often the differentiator is how we as a major incident team handled the communications. As I said in the How to Major a Majors video, most reasonable people are accepting that when it comes to IT, things do go wrong. Like it or not, it is to a degree a fact of life. What is most important though, in my belief, is how those occurrences are handled. And more often than not, this is amplified by how well or how badly your communication strategy is executed, if indeed you have one. So whilst most definitely the primary objective of major incident management is to restore service as quickly as possible, your stakeholders will most likely judge the major incident service on how well it is keeping those differing groups of stakeholders in the loop at the various stages of the major incident. So, well, let's start at the beginning. So let's picture the scene. All is well within the world of IT. It's a sunny Thursday afternoon. Weather forecast for the weekend is looking good. No significant changes are planned. Pub gardens are once again open. Then the monitoring screen starts turning from glorious green to a sea of red. The service desk phones start ringing off the hook and the calls are starting to back up. You start spotting in your Teams chats from colleagues with cryptic, curious, have we got an issue type questions. Yep, we've all been there. The start of a major incident. Now, for this video at least, I'm not going to go into the ins and outs of how to handle the identification, logging, categorization and assignment of a major, but I will say that initial phase of the major incident, it's totally normal that lots of people in all three of those different stakeholder camps can start running around with their hair on fire. It's crucially important that the MIM individual function team have a well-documented, rehearsed, tooled mechanism for getting the management of the major incidents underway. But most importantly, here is our first checkpoint for where decent communications are absolutely essential. At this juncture, it's essential that the MIM has a short amount of time to get their ducks in a row, that the right information is captured, that the right people are engaged, that the right 360 checks start to take place. However, whilst these activities are taking place or being initiated, it can cause a significant amount of anxiety outside the MIM function that, well, A, IT have acknowledged that there is an issue, and B, that they're doing something about it. If this anxiety isn't addressed or acknowledged, it can lead to divergent streams of activity being kicked off outside the governance and control of major incident management, which can impede their ability to restore service as quickly as possible. There was a recent example I came across whereby the MIM team I was working with at the initiation of a P1 were trying to call this through to the team leader of the technical team that supported the impacted service. Team lead's mobile was going straight to voicemail and they weren't responding to Teams chats. Their team members were simply responding with, sorry mate, Gaffer's on the phone. And when the MIM finally got through to the team lead some 15 minutes later, they shared that they'd been on the phone to the department head that is responsible for the impacted service, who had called them direct because they thought they had an issue, had reported this to the desk but hadn't heard anything from IT in regard to the major. Already in that situation, the MIM process is out of kilter and having to play catch up. Not good for anybody. And I'm guessing some of you might be listening to that scenario, nodding along, thinking, yeah, I've been in this situation too. So how do we deal with that? Well, my advice, as part of that initiation of the MIM process, the very first thing you should do is to issue what I call the "We've got this" comms. What do I mean? Well, that is nothing more than a short, concise message from MIM to as many people as practical and as possible, acknowledging that major incident management have accepted a major incident for the whatever service and that the major incident process is beginning. Now, the specifics of how that message gets delivered and to whom may differ depending on the size, scale, complexity of your business and operating model, but the principle is valid nonetheless. A short message informing those various groups that MIM are on the case. Some examples I can share. A business I worked for utilised SMS to issue major incident comms. We maintained a number of SMS distribution lists that the MIM team could use, one for the internal managers within the IT department that included the senior management team, technical team leads, service managers, service desk leads, so on. And we also maintained a distribution list per critical business service that contained the internal to the business customers for those services. For example, for the major finance line of business app, this contained the senior managers and IT business owners within the finance department themselves, plus the relationship and service managers within IT aligned to the finance team. Therefore, when the MIM team took receipt of a finance application P1, the very first activity before anything else was to send an SMS to the IT distribution list and one to the finance distribution list, informing those stakeholders that MIM were beginning their process. This instantly allowed those stakeholders to be aware and comforted that IT were on the case and that they could expect further information and or instruction in the coming minutes. Okay, but what about that third group, the people using the services themselves? That could be literally thousands of people that need to be informed. Sending an SMS to all of those is going to be slow, expensive, difficult, and after all, they're probably the most important people to inform, right? Well, completely acknowledge and agree with that, so here's what I've done to address that. As I mentioned, as part of the IT distribution list, we included the service desk leads and the service managers. In the scenario where a major incident kicks off, it's totally normal for users to pick up the phone to their service desk or their trusted contact in IT, typically the service manager. So we instructed the service desk leads as soon as that text arrived to update the phone system and the online IT portal with a corresponding message, informing users we were managing an issue as a notification. Also, the service managers then were also armed with the info to be able to handle any out-of-band communications. Not only did this benefit end users wondering whether there was an issue or not, it also benefited the IT desk as these instant messages informed users there was an issue and meant the desk were then unlikely to continue receiving waves of calls reporting the same issue. But in short, simply by sending that short announcement before anything else and adopting a working out loud approach, this 1 minute activity each and every time saved thousands of minutes in trying to control and recorrect MIM activity where those communications hadn't been present previously. First and foremost, beneficial to the user base and the customers, but beneficial to MIM and IT. We've quelled all the additional, maybe unnecessary noise, and we can focus on the task in hand, restoring service. I mentioned earlier that the communication needs for each of those three groups can be different, given their roles within the IT operating model. And as we go through the process, that will become more apparent. However, initially, my view is that all parties' needs are pretty much the same. Is there an issue? Yes. What's impacted and who's on the case? To which the answer is, or should be, MIM have got this. So we've told the relevant parts of our world that MIM are on the case, and the MIM team are now following their runbooks to get the right people engaged to restore service. But even after that initial message, relevant people, especially those accountable for the service, are going to want to know what's going on and what's being done to get the service back online. So now let's focus on that part of the process. I talked about in that last section about those three different groups, those being the users, those that need to be informed of the incident and those that need to be engaged to fix the incident. I think it's important to have a defined comm strategy throughout the incident for each of these different groups. Now, my favourite catchphrase from season 1 is already making a welcome return for season 2, and that is most definitely horses for courses. I won't understate the importance of, before any major incident lands, engaging with those various groups and understanding what each function's comms requirements are for each type of situation and building your comms strategy accordingly. Communications can be a very personal, subjective topic, and it's not uncommon for people to air their grievances or frustrations where these messages don't hit the mark. It is maybe somewhat impossible to please everybody all of the time. But don't be dismissive of any negative feedback you get. Each failing is an opportunity to learn, iterate and improve. My standard base approach is the following, which depending on the organisation, depending on the customer, depending on the requirements, I then iterate from. Firstly, let's deal with communications for those involved in restoring service. Most MIM functions will be familiar and will utilise a conference call, more increasingly Teams or Zoom calls, often referred to a bridge or a tech bridge call. And well, yeah, this is great practice. However, I think there are a couple of golden rules when it comes to running and chairing these bridge calls from a MIM perspective. First off, let's consider the audience. I think it's crucial that these technical bridge calls include only those needed in restoring the service. I've sat on many a bridge call where there are participants from those other two groups. Now, often, especially if you're in IT or an IT service management role, there can be some overlap between the accountable group, customer group, and those that are the provider group. Now, that's okay, but the MIM must tightly control the conversation and agenda to focus on the actions needed to restore service. There will be a need to have a feed from the user group and the customer group, but that should be a set item on the agenda at certain points. That brings me to the second golden rule. Have a set agenda that the MIM must ensure the bridge call sticks to, and really importantly is repeated cyclically. Again, I've been on calls where there is a loose agenda, not closely followed, or no agenda at all, and the call can descend into chaos with no structure or run for hours on end. This makes it very difficult post-incident to determine who did what, at what time, for what purpose, and it makes it difficult to keep a tight grip on the secondary activities such as end-user comms needed during the incident itself. My advice, have a short agenda that the MIM runs through at least every 30 minutes. That agenda should include key points like what is the current impact of the business, what communications are required, what is the status of actions assigned, what further actions are needed, what resources do we have or are needed, is escalation required. Once those points have been covered, in my opinion, it's imperative that the MIM plays that back to the call via a SITREP report, and these are shared either via email or via the ticket in the ITSM toolset to ensure throughout the life cycle of the incident there's a clear audit trail of activity and your bridge calls don't run without clear direction. So, providing your MIM function is convening those necessary resources via a actively managed and controlled bridge with a set agenda that repeats on loop and keeping and sharing a clear audit trail. In my opinion, this sort of takes care of ensuring those involved in the incident are sufficiently communicated to. So next then, that group of individuals that need to be informed on the progress of the incident, what I call the accountable group, those business and service owners inside and outside of IT. As I mentioned, I think it's important to keep that group directly out of the MIM-led bridge call. Maybe controversial. So let me be clear, I'm not advocating that we simply keep those guys and girls in the dark and don't talk to them and just send them the occasional text or email. Far from it. I'll go back and reiterate a couple of points from my previous points. Communication needs to be suitable for the audience, horses for courses. If you've ever attended a MIM bridge focused on restoration of service, these can be very technical in nature. I'd ask, do your customers, senior stakeholders need to be involved in this chat? Is it benefiting them? Is it the best use of their time? Does it benefit the focused activity needed in order to restore service? I'd argue not. Yes, the activity to restore service will benefit from a feed from the customer and user base, but I utilise a different route in order to do that. As part of the cyclical agenda on the MIM Tech Bridge, it's my view that there should always be a point whereby the MIM effectively leaves the techies to investigate what they need, carry out agreed actions, etc., which can act as a natural breakpoint for the MIM at least. At this juncture, it's good practice for the MIM to either leave that call temporarily or bring it to a close to reconvene at an agreed time point. Then I think it's important that a separate time-bound bridge is convened with the accountable customer group, and let's call that for ease a management bridge. The purpose of this call being to brief that group on the progress being made to restore service, to understand current impact of the business, discuss and or identify any potential workarounds or business continuity measures, and crucially to determine what communications are required to that third group, the end user group. Again, these management bridges should be limited to that particular audience. You don't want to include all the techies diverting them away from fixing the issue, and you don't want a potential cast of thousands of users. The objective for this management bridge is very specific. Inform that accountable group what is happening, gauge the ongoing impact, determine workarounds, agree end user comms. Once this agenda has been run through, this call should be concluded with an agreed reconvene time. Again, actions assigned against those agenda points. and a summary of the points covered sent to those in the group invited, not just those that attended. Again, for expediency, I would advocate agreeing a short template and format to allow these management bridge updates to be created and issued concisely and accurately, as well as being added to the incident ticket itself. Then, of course, it's probably time for the MIM to swivel chair back, reconvening the technical bridge and repeating the process as needed. Now, to allow these management calls to be successful, it is, again, up front worth agreeing with that group who is carrying out what role when a major incident lands. The MIM is responsible for ensuring the agreed process runs as agreed, but in large, complex organisations, it's probably somewhat unrealistic to expect a solitary MIM to be able to do everything in relation to managing that major incident. What I find works best is to have an agreement that during a major incident, firstly, who is going to be getting a feed from the user base about how they are impacted, what impact this is having to their operation, so that when that P1 is declared, that person or persons can be in liaison, could be the eyes on the ground, so to speak, which they can then relay into the MIM management bridge. Next, it's crucial to have agreement about how the key messages on progress or workarounds are going to be delivered back to the end user base, thus allowing you to successfully take care of the comms requirements for that user group. As a standard practice, irrespective of the incident, it's worth determining what end user comms need to happen all the time, every time. For example, if it's your service desk manager that updates the online portal with outage records and updates the automated message on the phone system, include them as a standard participant in these management bridge. So without having to sit through all the technical bridge information, on an agreed time loop, they can get the high level update from the MIM and update those channels accordingly. Then it's important to have a number of communication channels available to you, dependent on who those users are, what and how the service is impacted, and so on. Now, this can quite often rely on specific business knowledge that may be out of the realms of the MIM to deal with effectively. Importantly here, it's not or rarely a one-size-fits-all approach. In one of my first roles, I was a service relationship manager for a law firm, and my job was to understand the customer and user base, how IT services were used, what worked well, what didn't. I was the conduit, I guess, between IT and the rest of the business. Now, when we had a major incident kick-off, our IT team used to deliver that "we've got this" message, which I found really beneficial, as my mobile would often start to glow red hot from all of the calls I'd be getting from various departments in the business wondering what was going on. Our MIM team, after they had held their initial tech bridge and ensured the portal and phone lines were updated, they would convene one of these management bridges. We had agreed up front that my role in the process was, on receipt of the "we've got this" message, was to start calling around the various departments to find out who and what was impacted. And to do this, I had to call upon some of that business knowledge that I had acquired in my very specific role. For example, if the document management system was down, I would make a beeline for the legal departments, as this was crucial to their role, and one particular department in our Cardiff office. However, I knew support functions like HR, finance, as well as our overseas teams tended not to use this document management system, therefore I needn't waste my time or theirs with additional calls. This meant by the time I attended the first management bridge, maybe 30, 45 minutes into the incident, I had loads of useful info about the issue, what the users were seeing, the level of impact, and so on. This would then aid the MIM in feeding this information into the tech bridge as required. As part of that management bridge, it also allowed that group to determine what additional comms using the right agreed standard channel was that we could use, and the MIM could ensure that these actions were assigned and tracked. Would it have been feasible for us to expect the MIM to do all of that? Well, in my experience, no. The MIM in those scenarios had enough to do by ensuring the right people, IT and customer side, were engaged, bringing these people together, assigning and tracking actions. Expecting them to do the hard yards when it came to issuing comms would have simply burnt more time than they had available. Instead, the MIMs were well versed on making sure the right things were happening by the right people at the right time and correcting this should it look like it were going off track. A couple more points on those end user comms. Now, I found the more elegant, refined and specific the better. We've probably all been recipients of MIM Comms at one time or another, where the process is simply send an email to all users irrespective of the issue. I'm not a fan of that approach at all. I think there is a place for email comms, but certainly not the email everybody all of the time approach. Unless you can 100% guarantee A, everyone in your business is receiving that email is impacted, B, that the email is and can be delivered to all that need it, C, it's going to be read in a timely fashion. We all get shit tons of emails, and some of us are better than others in handling those. Therefore, a fire and forget email, whilst yes allows you to say I've sent comms, there's no guarantee it will be read in a timely fashion when the user needs it. Plus, I don't know about you, I don't really need any more emails for notifications of major incidents for services as a user I don't use or care about. Odd analogy. Yes, they're making a comeback. You know that feature that lots of car radios have that interrupt whatever it is that you're listening to with the traffic announcements? I hate that. There I am singing along to Westlife, then all of a sudden I get an announcement that the M25 is closed when I'm about 150 miles away. I think this email everybody approach is the IT equivalent. Second point, what if your preferred channel of communication is impaired, or what if there is a better channel for you to use? Think back to that online store example. If there was an issue affecting that service, would it be the best option to email every registered user telling them that the online store is unavailable, or to put a holding page up informing users that there is an issue that is being worked on? Thirdly, try and template the comms that you're sending, whatever channel is being used, so that they are standard. And I don't just mean wording, look and feel as well, so that it's clear to the recipient what the message is and the importance of it. Not only is that beneficial to the users, it will also allow you to deliver these much quicker rather than starting from scratch every time. Lastly, always include on your communications when the next update is going to be issued, and move hell and high water to stick to that. This helps manage your customers and user expectations about when they are next going to be getting an update. Even if there is no update, say that. It's better than saying nothing and leaving people in the lurch. Okay then, so to recap, during an incident itself, firstly, convene a tech bridge, run it to a set agenda and make sure that's run on loop. Build in a breakpoint to run a similar but different management bridge, and via the MIM ensure there is a feed going back and forth as these bridges repeat. Ensure that the MIM is centrally keeping an audit trail of activity and actions, and that at the end of each bridge, technical or management, concise, templated minutes are issued to each of those groups, and that the ticket within the ITSM is updated. As part of that management bridge, agree who is carrying out what role in terms of liaison with the user base, and agree specific targeted channel-specific end-user comms, as well as ensuring IT are maintaining their standard end-user comms via the in-place support channels. Providing you've got that licked, hopefully you'll soon be in a place where service has been restored. Well, relief. Service has been restored. Before we can confidently resolve the incident, not place into monitoring, again, we need to consider communications. Quick aside, if you want to hear why I hate in monitoring, check out my very first SIOAOA video on this link somewhere up here. When we've ascertained that we've moved into the final phase of the incident, I would recommend firstly that a management bridge wrap-up is held before the technical bridge with all your resolvers is stood down and they busily get back to whatever they were doing pre-incident. Naturally, you want that management group, having consulted with the end user group, to be satisfied that service has been restored, and indeed there may be residual or remnant activities for the IT group to carry out. Maybe reversing workarounds that they'll need to do before they're fully stood down. Key agenda items for that management wrap-up: what end user comms are required to confirm service restoration, what heightened awareness activities are required, particularly to sniff out any hint of reoccurrence, or mop up any secondary or residual issues. As part of that management wrap-up, I find it common that the why has this happened, what are we doing about it questions start to get asked. Now, it's essential that a post-mortem for any and every major incident takes place, but I'd suggest now is not the ideal time to start that. We've got to make sure that service stability remains in place before the deep dive investigation starts to take place, and that all parties are confident that the incident has indeed been resolved. To help manage that scenario, I find it useful to reiterate to the group that a post-incident review, or let's say PIR for short, will take place, when that will be scheduled, and what input from each audience member will be required. Providing the management bridge has wrapped up neatly, the same needs to be done with the technical bridge. Again, providing all actions associated to the live incident are complete. Responsibility for tracking ongoing actions via which process is known and agreed, and it is clear to all required participants when the PIR will be held and what input again is required from participants. As with the other bridge calls we've held, at this point the MIM should be issuing a wrap-up set of minutes to close off the live management of the issue and confirm the issue is resolved. Then we come to the post-incident review. I've seen too often that post-incident reviews focus purely on the technical elements of the major incident. What failed? Why did it fail? What did we do to fix it? Of course, that is required, but it's not the only important reason for being when it comes to post-incident reviews. The PIR I consider to be one of those key communication activities. Naturally, all of those groups are going to have questions and a view about how the incident came to be, then of course how it was handled. And it can be that latter part that does get overlooked. The PIR process should facilitate an open conversation about how the incident was handled, effectiveness of the communications issued, any particular learnings that can be taken from that, then implemented via a service improvement process. Just as we'll feed any specific technical issues, investigations and actions into problem management, how the process was handled and executed should be fed into the incident management SIP. Next, let's talk about the audience for the PIR. Now, again, I've seen organisations hold a management PIR and a technical PIR. However, never the twain shall meet. If you want to hold separate meetings, fine, but there should definitely, again, be a feed from one to the other, just as our bridges during the live incident maintained. One option is for those in the IT circle to hold an internal review to get all the in-depth technical ducks in a row, before then holding a collective review that looks at both the technical details of the incident and how well it was handled from a process perspective. Again, from MIM, this should be clearly documented with appropriate actions recorded and fed into the relevant appropriate process, be that service improvement, problem management, and so on. I've also found it beneficial to issue a degree of end-user comms after a post-incident review. For example, the review may have highlighted something of importance that needs sharing with the user base. For example, should this happen again, here's what we recommend by way of workaround, or simply just to assure your users that this episode has been reviewed and closed. So, to wrap up this first episode, I'll reiterate a point that I made slightly earlier, and that is comms is and can be subjective depending on the situation, the audience, and personal preference. I did a quick estimate, and I reckon in my career I've been involved directly or indirectly in easily over 2,000 major incidents. I'd safely bet on each of those there was a user or customer or someone in IT that would say the comms weren't right for them, even if the opposite were true for every other user, customer or IT support professional. As I've called out today and previously, having an agreed, well-defined approach based on user requirement that caters for different audience groups, that is utilised consistently, at least allows you a fighting chance to delight as many of those stakeholders as is possible and is required. Not having any of that is going to lead to inconsistent, haphazard, ad hoc comms, which will firstly disrupt the objective of being able to restore services as quickly as possible, and again, as importantly, cast doubt on your ability to deliver a value-add service. Last word of advice when it comes to your major incident comms strategy, well, make sure you communicate that as well. It's all very well having a well-defined strategy based on some of the ideas that we've talked about here. Yet when it comes to executing it, if it's only the MIM that knows what should be happening, well then you've probably not achieved very much. Make it a habit to let all of those various stakeholders know in advance how MIM will be running major incidents, what the various roles are and what they can expect to see. As I've said before, it's not what happens that matters, it's how you respond to it that does. Okay, thanks for listening. I've been Gareth at SIOAAOA. This has been how to ensure your major incident comms are magnificent. And see you next time. If your major incident comms have crashed, switch them off and on again.